Eleanor Whitmore had always been a woman of quiet strength. At 76, her days were filled with tending her little garden, sipping tea on the porch, and cherishing visits from her only granddaughter, Lily. The rest of the world saw her as just another elderly widow in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But Eleanor still had her sharp mind, her independence, and a modest fortune she and her late husband had carefully built over decades. One warm afternoon, Lily came running up the porch steps, her small face pale and troubled. Eleanor immediately noticed something was wrong. Normally, Lily bounded into her arms with laughter. Today, she hesitated, glancing nervously over her shoulder before speaking. "Grandma?" Lily whispered, almost as if she was afraid the walls might hear. "I have to tell you something. It's about Mom and Dad." Eleanor set down her teacup slowly, her heart sinking. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. They said they're going to take all your money." The words stumbled out in a rush. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I heard them last night. They think you're too old to notice. They said they'll make you sign papers, and you won't even understand what's happening." For a moment, Eleanor's breath caught in her chest. Her own son, her daughter-in-law. She had suspected they saw her more as a burden than family lately. The way their visits were more about prying questions of her will and finances than about love. But to hear it from her innocent granddaughter was like a knife twisting in her chest. "Are you sure, Lily?" Eleanor asked softly, her voice trembling. Lily nodded furiously. "I promise, I'm not making it up. I don't want them to hurt you, Grandma. I don't want them to take everything from you." Eleanor pulled the child into her arms, her mind racing. Betrayal from strangers was one thing, but betrayal from her own flesh and blood, that was unforgivable. She stroked Lily's hair gently, whispering, "Thank you for telling me, darling. You're very brave, but inside." Eleanor's thoughts had already shifted. If her son and daughter-in-law truly meant to rob her blind, then they underestimated her gravely. They thought she was too old to fight back, too frail to notice, too gentle to resist. But Eleanor had faced storms before, and this time, she was going to make a plan of her own. Over the next few days, Eleanor kept her composure, but her mind was always alert. She pretended nothing had changed, greeting her son, Richard, and his wife, Denise, with her usual warmth whenever they stopped by. She smiled, served tea, and asked about their lives, all while quietly observing their behavior. It didn't take long for Eleanor to notice the small signs. Denise lingering in the study when she thought no one was watching. Richard asking oddly specific questions about her accounts and property deeds. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing at her in ways that made her stomach twist. She had heard enough from Lily to know what they were planning, but now she wanted proof. One afternoon, while pretending to look for a gardening magazine, Eleanor wandered past a study and noticed the study door slightly ajar. The room was empty, but on the desk lay an envelope with her name on it. Curious, she approached and carefully peeked inside. The envelope contained a printed document detailing a plan to convince her to sign over her assets under the guise of simplifying inheritance. Her heart pounded as she read. There were steps, deadlines, even fake legal forms that they had prepared. Eleanor's mind worked quickly. Every detail confirmed what Lily had warned her about. The betrayal was real, deliberate, and methodical. They weren't planning to inherit. They were planning to manipulate. Later, she overheard a phone conversation between Richard and Denise while watering her garden. Denise's voice was urgent. "We have to act soon. Grandma's getting suspicious. She'll figure it out if we wait too long." Richard's laugh sounded forced and cruel. "Don't worry. She's old and we're careful. It'll be perfect." Eleanor clenched her fists, fury rising alongside determination. She could feel the betrayal biting deep, but she didn't allow herself to panic. Instead, she carefully catalogued every step they took in her mind, noting their weaknesses, their overconfidence, and their lack of awareness of just how sharp she still was. When Lily came to her room that evening, Eleanor hugged her tightly. "You were right, sweetheart. They're planning to take advantage of me. But don't worry. We're going to be smarter than them. We'll protect what belongs to us." Her granddaughter's eyes shone with a mix of fear and hope. Eleanor smiled, feeling the first spark of her plan beginning to form. They had underestimated her, but soon they would see that age, experience, and cunning were far more powerful than greed. Eleanor spent that night in quiet thought, sipping chamomile tea while the house was silent. Betrayal by her own son had stung deeply, but she had never been a woman to give up without a fight. If Richard and Denise thought they could manipulate her into signing everything over, they were gravely mistaken. Her mind raced as she devised a plan that was subtle, clever, and foolproof. She couldn't confront them directly, not yet. Greed made people sloppy, and she intended to use that to her advantage. The first step was documentation. Eleanor gathered copies of all her assets, bank accounts, and property deeds. She had every detail carefully catalogued and secured in a safety deposit box at a separate location. Next, she reached out to a trusted family lawyer, an old friend who had handled her late husband's estate years ago. "I think someone is trying to manipulate me," she admitted, careful not to reveal too much. Her lawyer listened carefully and promised to prepare legal protections that would make any attempt to coerce her completely void. Eleanor's plan also involved testing Richard and Denise's intentions without revealing that she knew. Over the next few days, she began asking innocuous questions about updating the will or checking bank statements in casual conversation, carefully noting how her son and daughter-in-law reacted. Each flinch, each over-eager suggestion to sign documents quickly, confirmed the greed she already suspected. Then came the most delicate part. Lily. Eleanor confided in her granddaughter, explaining that they needed to be patient and observe. "Sweetheart," she said, stroking Lily's hair, "we're going to outsmart them. But we have to act carefully. One wrong move, and they could succeed." Lily nodded solemnly, proud to be part of her grandmother's strategy. The child's small presence was also part of the plan. Her innocence would distract and disarm the greedy couple when the time came. By the end of the week, Eleanor's plan was set. She had a secure location for all her assets, a legal safety net in place, and a way to confront Richard and Denise without giving them a chance to manipulate her further. They had assumed she was frail, forgetful, and easy to deceive. But Eleanor had decades of wisdom, patience, and cunning on her side. When the moment came, they would realize that underestimating a grandmother was a mistake they could never recover from. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Richard and Denise arrived at Eleanor's house, their eyes gleaming with the confidence of people who believed they were about to succeed. They carried a stack of papers, neatly organized, and a pen for her to sign. To them, it was the final step, the culmination of their meticulous plan. Eleanor greeted them warmly, her smile calm and reassuring. "Good morning, you two. I see you've brought paperwork," she said, motioning them into the living room. Everything about her demeanor was casual, even cheerful, but inside, her mind was sharp and alert, watching every movement. Richard cleared his throat. "Mom, we thought it would be best to finalize the estate documents today. You know, just to make things simpler for everyone." He smiled, a little too brightly, as Denise hovered beside him, nodding. Eleanor sat down gracefully, folding her hands on the table. "Of course. Let's go through them." As Richard began to speak, Eleanor noticed how quickly his eyes flicked to her hands, the way Denise subtly nudged him to push for a signature. They were so confident in their manipulation that they didn't notice the faint glimmer of satisfaction in Eleanor's eyes. She began reviewing the documents carefully, pretending to skim while actually noting every detail they expected her to miss. She murmured. "Some of these forms don't seem quite right. I'll need my lawyer to look over these before signing anything." Richard's smile faltered. "Mom, it's fine, really. Just a formality." Eleanor leaned back, her voice calm but sharp. "I think not, Richard. I see now why Lily was worried. You two assumed I wouldn't notice your attempts to transfer my assets prematurely." Denise's hand trembled slightly. "Mom, it was just..." Eleanor raised her hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "No, it was deliberate. You thought you could manipulate me, but I've anticipated every move. All my assets are secured, every account, every property, every document, protected and under legal oversight. Any attempt to claim them without my consent is null and void." Richard and Denise froze, their confidence evaporating in an instant. The smug certainty they had carried into the room was gone, replaced by shock, fear, and the bitter realization that they had underestimated her. Eleanor glanced at Lily, who stood quietly behind her, proud but slightly wide-eyed. "You thought you could take everything from me, but you forgot one thing," Eleanor said softly. "Underestimating a grandmother is always a mistake." The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. The betrayal they had counted on to succeed had completely backfired, and Eleanor's quiet power filled the space like a living presence. After the confrontation, Eleanor allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Richard and Denise slumped into the sofa, their earlier arrogance replaced by disbelief and anger. Yet they could do nothing. Every legal safeguard Eleanor had put in place left them powerless. She rose from her chair, walking past them with a steady grace, and turned to Lily, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange. "Sweetheart," Eleanor said, kneeling down to her granddaughter's level, "you were right to warn me. But I want you to remember something important. Family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, love, and trust. And if anyone tries to take advantage of you, you must always protect what's yours." Lily nodded, her eyes wide, absorbing every word. She hugged her grandmother tightly, feeling both relief and pride. To her, Eleanor had transformed from the grandmother she always adored into a formidable protector, a woman whose intelligence and courage could not be challenged. Turning back to Richard and Denise, Eleanor's voice was calm but firm. "You can try to intimidate, manipulate, or pressure me, but you will fail every time. My assets, my decisions, my life, they remain mine, and any attempt to override that is illegal." Richard's face flushed with embarrassment, while Denise shrank into the sofa, realizing the magnitude of their failure. They had miscalculated, assuming their greed could overcome decades of wisdom and experience. Eleanor smiled faintly, a mix of triumph and lesson-giving. "Lily, come with me," she said, leading her granddaughter to the study. Inside, she handed Lily a small envelope. "This is yours for now. When the time comes, it will ensure that you're taken care of, and no one will ever be able to manipulate you like they tried to manipulate me." Lily's eyes shone with amazement. "Grandma? Really?" "Really," Eleanor said. "This is the reward for honesty, courage, and loyalty. You protected me when others wanted to betray me. That matters more than money." From that day forward, Eleanor and Lily's bond grew stronger than ever. Richard and Denise eventually left the house, humiliated and powerless, forced to face the consequences of their greed. The neighborhood whispered about the cunning grandmother who had outsmarted her own children, but Eleanor paid them no mind. She had proven one thing: intelligence, patience, and love for the right people were more powerful than deceit or entitlement. And as Lily skipped alongside her grandmother, holding the small envelope of security and trust, Eleanor knew that not only had she protected her fortune, she had also passed down a priceless lesson in courage, wisdom, and the true meaning of family. Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe even learned something from it. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, full of life lessons, drama, and emotions, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss an update. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep bringing you more inspiring and unforgettable stories. Stay tuned, because more amazing stories are on the way.